heartbroken right now because even though the guy was a gangster and he was the biggest heroin supplier in all of New York, in the movie American Gangster was centered on him. It says Frank Lucas, who was the center of the American Gangster film, dies at the age of 88. Frank Lucas, the Harlem drug kingpin immortalized in Ridley Scott's 2007 crime film American Gangster, died Thursday at the age of 88. Lucas's nephew, Aldwin, confirmed his death to Rolling Stone, adding that Lucas died of natural causes. Lucas, the original gangster who was known to confabulate his own criminal legacy, is credited as the architect behind the infamous Golden Triangle Gambit of the early 1970s, where he claimed to have imported heroin from Southeast Asia in the coffins of U.S. soldiers who were killed in Vietnam. Who the hell was going to look in a dead soldier's coffin? Lucas told New York in the 2000 article, The Return of Superfly. We had him make up 28 copies of the government coffins, except we fixed them up with the false bottoms, big enough to load up with 6, maybe 8 kilos. Lucas's coffin claim, however, came into question following the release of the movie. A quasi-fictionalized version of Lucas's life story was later in the subject of the American Gangster film, where Lucas was played by Denzel Washington, portraying the drug lord. And I said, I don't care what people say about the movie, even though some of it was fictionalized and made up, but Denzel Washington did a hell of a role for that film, portraying the drug lord. The film also inspired a Jay-Z album with the same name. As Jay-Z told Rolling Stone in 2007, Frank Lucas, it's something about when African Americans reach somewhere, no matter what they're doing. If they reach somewhere that no one has ever been before, you're like, go and take it. The North Carolina-born Lucas moved to Harlem after witnessing the Ku Klux Klan murder his cousin, an incident that Lucas said sparked his career in crime. Lucas would later become a protege of sports to Harlem mob boss Bumpy Johnson, who died of a heart attack in 1968. Lucas then took over as Harlem's drug kingpin and fronted what became one of America's biggest heroin empires. He says, I owned Harlem, I ran Harlem, and I brought it, Lucas bragged, which is what he referred to as the Golden Triangle scheme allowed Lucas to cut out the middleman, the mafia, and smuggle the drug indirectly. At its peak, Lucas's drug empire was making about $1 million per day, he claimed. Rather than quietly accumulating his wealth, however, Lucas lived lavishly, often donning a $100,000 floor-length chinchilla coat and matching $25,000 hat, which was an attention grab and a symbol that Lucas wore to the Ali Frazier boxing match, in 1971. Lucas was present at the fight, and spending habits drew the attention of the authorities, including Detective Richie Roberts, played by Russell Crowe in the movie. The Drug Enforcement Agency and the New York Police Department ultimately ended Lucas's reign in 1975, with Lucas receiving a 70-year prison sentence. However, Lucas later turned state's witness and provided evidence that resulted in dozens of drug-related arrests. Lucas was released from prison in 1981 after his sentence was reduced to time served. 3 years later, Lucas was again busted for a drug deal that violated his parole and spent 7 years behind bars. Sterling Johnson, a former New York City special narcotics prosecutor, called Lucas's operation one of the most outrageous international dope smuggling gangs ever. And so, yeah, but I'm just depressed by his death. I said I actually like that movie, and I might watch it again later on. Might not today, but tomorrow. But at least it's one of the best movies I've ever seen.